Time now for a scam alert. Bringing that to us is Gregor Matvos, and he's with Chicago Booth School of Business. Great to have you on the show.
Oh, Angie, thanks for having me.
So this was a huge scam that happened in Chicago, actually. It involved Scottie Pippen and someone he trusted. He gave this financial advisor $20 million to handle, and it went completely wrong. So you're here to tell us about how people can avoid having this situation happen to them. What's the first step people should do?
So I would say the first step is just check on your advisor. There is great websites by regulators. FINRA, for example, has Broker Check. You can go, you can look at the whole history of your advisor, where they worked, any disclosure they've had. So you can see things from, did they ever go personally bankrupt, which you may or may not care about. You can see whether they've been involved in any fraud cases, have they had to settle, or maybe there's just disclosures that you say, well, I'm okay with that. But I think that's the first place I would go look at.
Good idea, and I know the SEC also has a new site set up so people can check on brokers.
That's right. So if you just have an advisor that's registered with the SEC, you can go on the SEC website. If it's one of the 650,000 brokers registered with FINRA, you can go on the FINRA website. There's a lot of information out there, and it's pretty easily accessible. You just have to know it's there.
In the Madoff case, for instance, people learned about Bernie Madoff through their friends. So you really can't even trust who your friends are giving you.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. One of the things we found in our research was, for example, that even though there's big differences between, let's say, firms, so some firms on average have, let's call them cleaner financial advisors than others, even within firms, there's huge differences. And if you have an advisor with a previous record of misconduct, they're about 5 as likely to do it, even compared to an advisor at the same firm, at the same place. So you need to check the specific person and not just trust your network, not just trust the firm.
So not just because somebody works for a big firm, should you trust them?
Absolutely. I think that's a really important lesson.
Another thing you say is to watch the paperwork. Be careful what you sign.
Yeah, so I think that, that is always the case. I think giving power of attorney to anyone is a act of trust that you shouldn't extend lightly.
When people hand you a piece of paper with information, is it worth your time to perhaps have an attorney take a look at what this person is doing?
I think it depends. I think, attorneys are expensive. And I think it really depends. If it's a very standard thing, maybe not, but, it's very tough for me to tell on a specific situation. Now,
Scottie Pippen gave over $20 million, as I mentioned. Do you think he'll get his money back or most of his money back?
I don't know. It's tough with fraud cases, right? Like in Bernie and Madoff case. I think people did recover some of the amount of money they got eventually. So it's tough. It's a case-by-case thing. And one of the advantages if you deal with a bigger firm is at least the firm on its own won't go bankrupt, and you might be able to reclaim some of the money from them.
And maybe he'll be able to do some marketing and get his money back.
So, it's horrible what happened to Scottie Pippen. But in some ways, he's a reasonably young guy. He's got a really good income stream coming to him in the future if he wants it. He can work. If you're an 80-year-old retiree in Florida, you've signed all your assets to an advisor, and these disappear, then you'll be living off of Medicaid, and that'll be a tough life. So I think one important lesson that we found was, especially older people and less educated people are really vulnerable to financial advisors with misconduct. So I would say if you have parents, for example, who are investing a big portion of their money, maybe you should look into this for them. It helps.
I'm not even so sure how safe it is just to give all your investments to one advisor. I mean, maybe you should diversify a bit. I know that's asking a lot, but I hate to see anybody lose a dime. So there you go.
It's tough.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks for having me.